This week on The Record, a last-minute legal challenge threatens to kick the abortion question off Missouri's November ballot. But will a judge block voters from weighing in over a technicality? A power struggle in St. Louis County spills open why one council member was kicked out of his seat, reinstated, and now the county executive comes under investigation by an ethics committee. A third candidate jumps into Missouri's Senate race with big backing. Who former Senator Jack Danforth wants to see beat Josh Hawley? It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. One of the most accomplished politicians in Missouri history is wading into this November Senate race. For 2 decades, Jack Danforth represented Missouri in the U.S. Senate. Like Josh Hawley, Danforth graduated from Yale. Like Josh Hawley, Danforth served as Missouri's Attorney General. But unlike Hawley, Danforth believes the grand old party is still worth fighting for.
Josh has said that the old Republican Party is dead and we shouldn't mourn its death, and that's his quote. But the Republican Party stood for some very important principles, like the rule of law, like fiscal responsibility, like America's responsibility to have a strong foreign policy, peace through strength. All of those have been thrown overboard by this latest version of the Republican Party.
Those are some of the reasons Danforth said he's backing independent candidate Jared Young in November. Young is a business owner who sponsored this scene. He calls it the United Seats of America. Young bought tickets right behind home plate at a Cardinals game and gave them to 2 complete strangers who disagree with each other. It's a clever way to get attention and put you on his campaign email list, but it also produced some rather interesting exchanges between the two.
But I'm against abortion. I believe that life starts at conception.
I just don't want the system of democracy of checks and balances to break down.
My mind went blank on what they call those guys that dress up, drag queens.
Yeah. I think Jesus would accept everybody, especially those that need it a little more, maybe. Yeah.
I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
I'm planning on voting for Trump.
Yeah. I mean, I know felons that can't vote, let alone run for office.
Young is now extending that invitation to other Missouri voters in Kansas City and St. Louis. So who is Jared Young? He's pitching voters on a plan to use America's pastime as a platform to bring back the politics of yesteryear. His tagline, "We can be better." Jared Young, now on The Record. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You've got this nifty idea where you're taking 2 people who disagree, strangers, putting them in a ballpark and hoping they can kind of talk it out? How's it going?
Well, so I guess 2 things I should point out. One thing, running as an independent is always challenging. It's challenging to get attention. It's challenging to get your message out there. So we have to come up with really creative ways to get people to pay attention to us. And one of our core messages is that we have more in common than we do different. The 2 parties are constantly trying to drive us apart. They've decided that fear and anger are their best tools to win elections, and people are completely exhausted by that. And we believe that a campaign that tries to bring people together and reminds people that we're united and we have so much in common is going to be a breath of fresh air. So this is just one example of how we're trying to be a breath of fresh air in politics today.
Maybe united in the dismay at the outcome of Cardinals games these days. The Royals are doing a little bit better. It feels almost like a political intervention, but having become familiar with some of the rancor in American politics these days, I almost wonder if it might backfire, like the intervention in The Sopranos, where it's like, wait, this is getting out of hand. Was there any of that?
Not that we've seen so far. So far, it's been a universally positive experience. There's probably some natural selection there. People aren't going to volunteer for this if they truly despise and hate the other side. But I think the reality is there just aren't that many people out there in real life that truly despise the other side. That's what we see online. We get fooled into thinking that online is real life. But when you actually sit 2 people down next to each other, face to face, they have a hard time being really awful to each other. So we sit these people down for a full baseball game. We deliberately choose people who look different and think differently, and in the end, they end up becoming friends. They don't convince each other to change their views, but they realize, hey, we disagree on a few things, but that doesn't mean we can't get along and we can't have cordial conversation.
So just full disclosure for our viewers, I'm getting to know you almost off the cuff. It's not often that we interview somebody where I don't know a voting record, I'm just reading your bio. So we're kind of getting to know you sight unseen in a sense.
Are you sure yet you'll be on the ballot in November?
Yes. So we needed 10,000 signatures to get on the ballot. We submitted 25,000 signatures back in May. So we've officially been certified we are on the November ballot.
Have you ever run for office before?
I have not.
So why choose this race? Why run against Josh Hawley, the incumbent?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and especially from my friends who are involved in politics. They're like, you're jumping straight to the World Series. But the reality is my goal was never just to become a U.S. Senator. My goal is to significantly change the way that politics works in Washington. In order to accomplish that, I think you have to do it as an independent. And in order to be effective as an independent and really be an agent for change, I think you have to do it in the Senate. I didn't originally run thinking, hey, Josh Hawley needs to go. In fact, I voted for him in 2016 and 2018. I ran because I think our system is broken and we have lost the ability to disagree productively and actually engage on complex issues. But as I've closely observed Josh Hawley over the last year and a half, as I've been doing this, I've realized he's the epitome of what I'm fighting against. He is someone who uses anger and contempt and fear to try to gin up support. And he's also, I'm a moderate conservative. He's also someone who's turned his back on traditional Republican principles, traditional conservative principles, such as limited government, such as support for the Constitution, if you think about the things that he was involved in on January 6th, peace through strength, his lack of support for Ukraine and Israel. He was one of the only people to vote against the Israeli aid package. So for me, as someone who's voted Republican a lot of my life, not as much in the last 10 years, it's kind of a double whammy. The anger, hate, and contempt that he drives, and then his turning his back on principles that are important to me.
You took one of my next questions. I was just going to put you on the spot and ask you, if we were to go look at your voting record, what are we going to find there? You're an independent now.
Yeah.
Have you voted for Democrats, Republicans? What does your voting record look like?
I voted for Republicans and Democrats all my life. I've been an independent.
In 2020, Trump or Biden?
2020, I voted for Biden. 16, I voted for Evan McMullen.
Okay. A little, and I think I saw in your bio that you might have lived in Utah for a bit.
I did my undergrad in Utah.
Yeah, he ran for the Senate there, of course.
Yes, I did.
A couple states have elected an independent, but not many. How do you assess the uphill battle that you face?
So here's the thing we've discovered. So before we jumped into this, of course, we did polling to see, is there even a path here? And what we discovered is there's a huge appetite for this among voters. The voters are ready. The media is still trying to get their head wrapped around it. The political strategists definitely still trying to get their head wrapped around it. But the voters are ready for this. 43% of Missouri voters identify as independents. 70% said they'd be interested in voting for an independent in this particular race. So there's a path there. The voters are out there. The challenge for an independent is always resources. I've put a lot of my own resources into this, but it still pales.
$750,000 in a loan.
Yes,
a little bit more than that.
So it still pales in comparison to the $7-8 million that Coons has and the $20 million that Hawley has. And so the challenge is always, can I get enough resources to just make people aware that there's a viable third option out there? And the more people that are getting aware, the more they're getting excited, and the more our polling numbers go up.
You also run up against that late decision, the undecided voter, right? This is the mythological unicorn in American politics. As they approach the ballot box, they feel pressure to win. People that spend a lot of time simmering in politics understand that the best way to send a message to a politician you don't like is to defeat them. Do you have any concern that a third-party candidacy helps usher him back into 6 more years in the Senate?
No, I don't. There are a couple of reasons for that. One, as a moderate conservative, I anticipate taking more votes away from Hawley than from Coons. But I really just reject the whole kind of wasted vote paradigm because it just doesn't make sense. Your vote individually is not going to decide the election. No single vote decides a Senate election.
No,
it never in the history of America has a statewide race been decided by a single vote. So the question is, why should you vote? If your single vote doesn't impact the outcome, why should you vote? You vote because you have a chance to make a statement about what you think needs to happen in your country, what you think needs to happen in your state, your city, whatever it may be. And so the question the voters should be asking themselves, or I invite them to ask themselves, is what statement are you going to make with your vote in this Senate election?
So why not Lucas Coons?
Lucas Coons is a Democrat. Democrats cannot win in Missouri right now.
Just because of that letter D next to their name?
There is no path for a Democrat to win. He's been campaigning for 3 years straight. He's never bumped above 35%, except in his own kind of
push polls, internal polls.
Yeah.
There we go. Jared Young, thanks for your time.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
A power struggle in St. Louis County while a judge kicked a council member out of his seat and another judge reinstated him for now.
Long simmering grudge matches in the St. Louis County Council erupted in a flurry of court filings this week. The council was planning to vote Tuesday to put a question to voters seeking greater independence from County Executive Sam Page. Right now, the council and the executive both share the same legal counsel, though they often clash over policy and priorities. Before the big vote, a judge abruptly intervened to remove Councilmember Dennis Hancock for illegally hiring his stepdaughter in a county job. Hours later, a different judge stepped in and vacated that ruling, allowing him back in. At Tuesday's council meeting, Hancock addressed the allegations against him, saying it was all a mistake, quickly rectified. He also says he believes the timing was no coincidence.
I think that's why it was rushed, was to keep me from voting today.
What's happened today and yesterday is exactly the reason why we need to have our own council.
Hancock also called out County Executive Sam Page's absence during Tuesday's meeting, accusing him of violating the county charter's prohibition on holding a side job. Page's office says he volunteers at SLU Hospital when he has time. Chairwoman Shalonda Webb now says she'll reconvene an ethics committee to investigate claims that she calls, quote, alarming and, if true, reveal a deeply troubling betrayal of public trust. Across the river, the Illinois state flag is getting a facelift, and you could help to draw it. Starting Tuesday, you can submit your designs to a commission. It will pick 10 finalists, post them online, and allow people to pick favorites. They can also vote to keep the current flag. The Illinois General Assembly will ultimately make its decision based on all that feedback. We're back after this. A last-minute legal challenge threatens to kick the abortion question off of Missouri's ballot this November. The Catholic Thomas More Society argues the ballot petition drive was invalid due to a technicality. Missouri law says if you're circulating petitions for signatures and you're going to delete something in the law, you put that part in brackets. If you're going to add something, you underline that portion. You also have to list anything you would repeal from existing law. The abortion petition did underline new language it would write into the Missouri Constitution. It did not explicitly, in brackets, outline each and every law that would possibly one day conflict with the amended Constitution if it passes. Mary Catherine Martin is a lead attorney with the Thomas More Society, and she joins us now. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Bringing this suit here. Donald Trump says that voters should decide this question. Senator Josh Hawley says voters should decide this question as well. So why would a lone judge step between voters and the ballot box?
I think I would have to question your premise and ask you which question you're talking about, right? The initiative petition process does allow voters to vote by design, one issue at a time. And one of our claims, not the one that you described, but the second one makes the point that this actually raises a host of questions and asks them to vote on them all at once, which is actually illegal. We have a constitutional provision protecting us from having to do that.
I'll grant you this. There are a number of open questions that would arise if voters did pass this amendment. It would set off. In fact, the amendment itself explicitly tells legislators you can update new laws, you can write new laws, you can regulate things up to a certain point, beyond a certain point. So there's a lot of legislating and a lot of judicial work. Let's look at it this way. Isn't that why we have judges, that they can compare when laws conflict with the Constitution?
I think this gets back to your first question, which is the Constitution allows us to vote on these questions. And in fact, since Dobbs, that's the right that we have back, the right to vote, to pass legislation limiting or making available all of these rights that were once off limits to voters, okay, and to legislation. Dobbs restored our right to vote. This puts it right back in the hands of the judges you were just describing. It is not the role of judges, actually, to decide what our Constitution says about reproductive health care generally, or even, since this says including but not limited to and all matters relating to, what even counts as reproductive health care. It's actually voters' responsibility and privilege to vote for individual issues one at a time and not hand it over to judges, never to be voted on again. So I'm glad you brought up this tension between the voters and judges, because I think that one common misunderstanding about this is that people think that this is us voting like we finally get to after Dobbs, when in fact this is creating a Roe versus Wade no voting expanse that's much, much greater than what we had under Roe versus Wade. It's much broader than abortion, and it hands it all back to judges. We're really voting when we vote for this to never vote again.
Well, I would not accept that. To never vote again, legislators could vote on a number of different laws. This amendment makes that clear. And every person that we...
I would ask you to point out where we will ever vote again about something that is, well, I should say, something that limits the right to contraception or abortion prior to viability, that is a limit that is designed to protect someone other than the person seeking care.
The current Secretary of State, who was running for governor, was in this studio just a few weeks ago and said that if this amendment passes, he'd be one of the first to draft a new amendment and try to have voters vote on that.
Well, precisely. We would only be able to vote if we were to manage to amend the Constitution back. This is a permanent amendment to the Constitution, and the only thing we would get to vote on again on these issues is if we do it again. There will be no legislation.
How many different laws, if you were to guess, do you think this amendment would repeal?
By implication, once it traveled to a judge who was going to interpret what? All matters relating to reproductive health care, including but not limited to ... It encompasses every regulation proposing to lit anything having to do with the reproductive organs across our entire legislative slate.
The ... just to fill it out for our audience, is prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, birth control, abortion care, miscarriage care, and respectful birthing conditions.
Actually, when I said ... I was recapping included but not limited to. That's the list we know about. Right. But the category is not limited to. It is not, explicitly not limited to those issues.
So you're saying that
it's everything, all matters relating to reproductive health care. So we're going to eventually be talking about gender affirming care. We're going to be talking about cloning, IVF. We're going to be talking about anything having to do with reproduction.
It seems you're asking regular, ordinary citizens who brought this, and certainly who consulted with lawyers, to play the role of judge and to hypothesize about which existing laws on the books out there might run afoul of this new amendment. Why would you expect an ordinary citizen to put themselves in a judge's robe and make that ruling before the voters have even weighed in here?
Again, I think you have this backwards. It is the amendment that asks citizens to guess what it will eventually cover. I'm asking for an amendment that identifies what it covers.
Mary Catherine Martin with the Thomas More Society, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
A lot more of that conversation up online on ksdk.com and past interviews from this program. When we come back, we check the record. IVF has become a hot-button political issue, and Democrats warned that electing Donald Trump for another 4 years would put that procedure in jeopardy. So just this week, Trump vowed to pay for it using federal...
And we need great children, beautiful children in our country. We actually need them. And we are going to be, under the Trump administration, we are going to be paying for that treatment. So we are paying for that treatment.
All Americans who want it?
For all Americans that get it, all Americans that need it. So we're going to be paying for that treatment, or we're going to be mandating that the insurance company pay.
The current politics are obvious here. IVF is enormously popular, and Trump knows he has to counter the Democrats' message there. But offering to pay for an incredibly expensive elective healthcare procedure also stands in stark contrast to what we've come to know as traditional Republican policy. Remember, this is the same guy who promised to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which famously covers pre-existing conditions that might result in using IVF to become pregnant. So let's check the record. 24 years ago, Donald Trump was flirting with a presidential run. And yes, he came to St. Louis and endorsed a very different kind of healthcare system than the one we have now.
What social issues would you work on? What domestic issues?
Well, I think the big issue, again, is healthcare. I mean, if you're not going to be able to take care of your sick, your infirm, what is the purpose of the whole thing? So I really think I do a terrific job with respect to healthcare and just making people better or treating people with great dignity, because dignity is the word. I mean, we have a terrible system right now. It's a system that doesn't work. You can look at so many other systems that are so much better, Israel, Germany, and Canada to a large extent. They're just better systems than ours, and probably in the long run would cost a lot less.
That was Donald Trump endorsing a universal single-payer healthcare system like the one Bernie Sanders supports. And he says it might be more affordable. How's he going to pay for every family in America to pay for IVF, those who need it? If IVF costs 15 to 30 grand per cycle, a rough estimate, and we know hundreds of thousands of American families use that procedure, a little rough math suggests the price tag on a promise like that nationwide, likely north of $8 billion a year for starters. That's it for us. Thanks for watching. We'll see you right back here at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.